Today we're going to take a JPEG image, separate it into layers, and take it into After Effects and turn it into a 3D animation. Today we're just worried about the Photoshop portion of this job, separating the image into separate layers of foreground and background. Before we get started, I want you to learn your first keyboard shortcut. Control on the PC or Command on the Mac, R for rulers. This is going to turn on the rulers or turn them off. And I always like to see the rulers. And the other thing I like to do here is to have some gray showing around the edges. Now I'm taking the mouse and I'm rolling it in and out here to change the zoom level. And if you don't have a mouse, go buy one. You really need to have a mouse. If you're trying to do this on a laptop without a mouse, you're just going to get frustrated. I want to talk first about all these selection tools. Now the first one on the list is the rectangular marquee, and that will allow us to make a selection here. We can copy and paste and delete and do anything we want, and you can see this little dotted line around the edges. This is referred to as dancing ants, and we're going to use this dancing ants thing to be able to tell what's selected and what's not. So I'm going to deselect, Control or Command D. Let's go to the next tool here. If we hold down on this, we can see we've got several choices. Here we've got an elliptical marquee. Here we can draw out circles, ovals. If we want it to be a perfect circle, you hold Shift. That's sort of the default key to constrain all the time, regardless of what you're doing. You can hold Shift and constrain to a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm going to get rid of that selection by deselecting Control or Command D. We'll go now next to the lasso tools. The first one on the list, and by the way, I'm clicking and holding again, is the lasso tool. So we click on the lasso tool, and this is better at making a selection, but it's not very accurate, especially for somebody like me who's left-handed trying to use a mouse with my right hand. Just doesn't do a good job. Deselect, Control or Command D. We'll go to the next one, the polygonal lasso tool. I actually use the polygonal lasso tool a lot. It's a good tool. It's very handy. You just click, 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 and you can make really pretty accurate selections. We're not going to use it here. We have something much more exact. The fourth tool in the list, this is our selection tools, the object selection tool, a quick selection tool. We'll start with the object selection tool. And all you have to do with the object selection tool is go up here and click Select Subject. And we'll get this nice selection. It's not perfect, but it certainly saves us a ton of clicks. So let's try the next one. Here, clicking and holding on the tool, I'm going to go to the quick selection tool. Now, you'll notice that the lemurs are sitting on some boards here. We need to include those boards in the selection because this is part of our foreground layer. The lemurs and the boards are the foreground. All of this is the background. And so let's use this quick selection tool to simply drag right around in this area and pick up the boards. Looks pretty good. We still have an area up in here that we need to repair. So let's go and work on that. Click on the button up here at the top, select and mask. Now the first thing we're going to do here is change our view in the upper right to on layers. And that's going to show us this checkerboard background. The checkerboard represents what is transparent. And I'm just going to use the scroll wheel on the mouse to roll into this area right here. This is the problem area for us. So what we're going to do is go and get the first tool in the stack right here, which is the quick selection tool. And I want to make sure that you're using a small brush. Let's try size 20 for the brush. Now you can click on this and you can use this slider right here. You can type in here, but my favorite way of doing this is to use the bracket keys on the keyboard. Left bracket, right bracket. Left bracket makes the brush smaller, right bracket makes the brush larger. Notice that this brush has a little plus in the middle. That means we are adding to the selection. But this area here we need to subtract from the selection. So I want you to hold the Alt or Option key on the keyboard. Make sure you don't come anywhere near the fur right here, and we're just going to sort of walk down, and that gets most of it. Now here we can just dab the mouse and that should take care of the problem. And let's change the view to black and white. This area right here we can see a little bit of detail in the hair, and over in this section we can see it just looks jaggy and awful. So let's do this. First of all, we're going to click Refine Hair. Now we'll tell you that the Refine Hair function works really good on human hair, but it's not really fine-tuned for fur, so we're going to have to work on our fur. We're going to use the second tool in the stack here. This is the Refine Edge Brush tool, and we're going to increase the size of the brush. Let's go with maybe 45, and now I want you to center the brush on the line here where the fur is, and we're just going to draw in little short segments here. Now, don't overlap the areas that you've just gotten, and we're just going to kind of slowly work our way around, and there we go. Now let's switch our view to overlay, and as before, kind of like the on layers view, instead of showing a checkerboard, it shows us this red area. Red always indicates the masked out portion of the image. Now we're almost done. We need to do a couple of things. We're going to scroll to the bottom here. Now I want you to watch this edge. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. We're going to click the button for decontaminate colors, and I want you to watch the edges here as we click this. Now you see it seems to put back some of the detail in the fur. That's a good thing for us. Now output 2. I need you to take this down to new layer, and we're going to click OK. And there is our selection. Notice also here, this is the layers panel. Now we have two layers. We have something named the background copy, and we have the background layer, which is turned off. The visibility is turned off, this little eyeball. Now this is a good opportunity for us to stop and save. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to Save As. I'll save it as Lemur 3 for now. Next thing we're going to do is to make a copy of the background layer. We are going to keep a version of this in case we have to go back and make changes. So the way you make a copy, just drag the background layer down over this little box with a plus in it, and that will create a copy. Let's rename these layers now. Double click on the top layer and name it Lemurs. Double click on the middle layer and name it BG. BG is going to be our shortcut the whole semester for background. Let's turn on the background layer and turn off the lemurs layer, and we're back to our original look for the image. Now we need to select the lemurs. So what I want you to do is I want you to hover your mouse over the thumbnail for the lemur's image. It has to be parked over the thumbnail, and hold the control or command key and you can see the mouse turns into a little marching ants looking rectangle, and click. So we're holding control, clicking on that icon, and we'll see we now have our selection. From here, just hit the delete key. And now we have a cutout. Here's what we're going to do. We need to expand this area out. So we're going to go to the top to select, modify, expand. We're going to expand by about 60 pixels. It depends on how big your image is. This one is 5200 pixels wide. It's a pretty big image. So we're going out of the boundaries by 60 pixels here. Now we're going to go back again, select, modify, feather, and we're going to feather by half as much, 30 pixels. Now for some Photoshop magic, we're going to go up to Edit, Content Aware Fill. And let me explain what you're seeing here. On the left, this green area, this is what Photoshop is using to fill the cutout area. And this is the result over here. It doesn't look perfect, but it ain't bad. Now, depending on what your subject matter is, yours may heal perfectly the first time. Most of the time they need a little or a lot of work. So we're just going to click OK. And there is our healed area. I'm going to go ahead and deselect, Control or Command D. So now we're going to go look at the healing brushes. Let's see, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 8th tool in the list. And I want you to start with the spot healing brush. The spot healing brush is great for things like pimples, telephone wires, any high contrast elements. We're going to use the spot healing brush for this. And I need a bigger brush. So now we're just going to kind of dab across this area. Try a little bit bigger brush. Yeah, it seems a little better maybe. Yeah, and you'll just find that sometimes you can use it, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can go over the same area a couple of times and it'll help. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes the best thing is to dab it. Just click, click, click rather than dragging. That's the spot healing brush. Let's switch over to the regular healing brush. This is a pretty amazing tool, another smart one. What we're going to do with the healing brush is we're going to recreate this branch right here and try to connect these two branches. We're going to get a big brush. We're going to use a 500, and we can see the hardness is set to 0. And I'm just going to hit the Enter key to get rid of that dialog up there. So I'm going to hold the Alt key. And what we're doing is telling Photoshop to copy the pixels in this area so that we can paste them. We'll click right in this area right here, and we'll start to just paint along, and we'll see that the brush only goes so far, and then we have to go back and do it again. And the more times we do this, the more brush that we have to work with, because now it's able to copy all of those pixels. And it's not just copying the pixels, it's doing it in a smart way. It's analyzing all of the pixels around this selection. So we're getting pretty close over here. We're going to try to get to that original branch. And yeah, it almost matches up. Now I'm just going to dab right on top of it. And you know, it looks okay. It's not perfect, but it looks all right. Now we'll try to do the same thing with this stick up here. And I'm going to start kind of high up in the corner, sort of like we did with the other stick. And I'm going to start to paint downwards here. And it's looking okay. We're going to repair it a little bit once we get a little further. So one more little push here, and yes, it's going to get a little fuzzy and ugly. I think I'll just dab a couple of times to try to get that branch to mate up. Now, here's the kind of the dirty little secret here. We are trying to make this as good as we can make it, but in truth, the lemurs are going to hide most of this. Still, I'm grading you on how good you do on this. So I really want it to look as good as possible. So let's continue on. I want to take this pattern down here and kind of extend it out a ways. There's some kind of lines that run down here, and they give us an opportunity to stop this pattern at some point. But let's go ahead and see if we can draw in this pattern. Again, we're going to hold the Alt or Option key, and I'm just going to choose an area sort of in the left over there, and I'm going to start over at the edge and paint this out. And now I want to show you what happens if I keep painting here. What happens is it starts to look stripy, right? It's not really a pattern, it's more like stripes. So it's better to kind of dab or do short little strokes in this place because I am trying to set up a pattern. Now you'll notice that I'm dragging left to right instead of right to left. And the reason for that is we're going to start to make an edge. If I start painting this way, watch what happens. It makes a hard line here. It makes an edge because we ran up against the edge of the screen. It's trying to copy those pixels. So I'm going to undo, Control Z, and again, short strokes to the left, just dab around a little bit, trying to create that pattern. Okay, let's try now to play with our third healing tool, the patch tool. We are going to drag a circle around an area that we want to copy. Now we have two choices here, source and destination. So I'll show you how these work. Right now it's set to source, and if I start to drag this down, what's happening is it's trying to replace that spot. That's the opposite of what I need. I'm going to undo. I want to copy this spot, so we're going to change this to destination, and I'll drag it down here somewhere. Now, don't go crazy and try to get stuff around the edges because it doesn't matter. All it does is mess up the image more. You want to preserve all of this. You don't want to have to fix it. It's already whatever it is. We're just worried about the stuff behind the lemurs. Now, in our next step, I'm actually going to make the lemurs smaller. So we do want to make sure the area sort of around the lemurs looks as good as we can make it look. Okay, so let's make the lemurs smaller. We're going to first use the transform function. We need the lemurs layer. Select the lemurs layer first. Control or Command T. And we're going to start dragging down a corner here. And they're getting smaller. That's good. That's what we want. I'm going for a size of about 75. You can just type it in up here if you want to. 75. And I'll hit the tab, and there we go. They're 75. Now we can either hit the check box right there or the enter key. Either one will work. And now our lemurs are resized. They look okay. Let me go ahead and pull them down here to the very bottom. Okay, this is my favorite new tool, and that is content aware scale. This is kooky. All right, so what this is going to do, content aware scale. If I try to pull on a corner here, watch what happens to the lemurs. His neck is growing. Okay, well that's kind of cool, but it's not what we want. Okay, instead, we want to stretch these boards out to the edges. So I want you to hold the shift key. I hope it's shift. There we go. And drag the edges out. And look at that. The boards grow, but the lemurs stay in their proper aspect. That's just nuts. Now I want you to go a little bit further. Whoops, I got to hold the shift key again. I want you to go a little bit further out of the bounds here because, and we'll hit the enter key here to set that transform. And then I'm just going to push it over. The ugliest part of this image is sort of this bright area where all the sticks come together. So I'm just kind of trying to hide that just a little bit. We needed a little bit more room to move to create a shot. If you choose an image that's too tight, then the camera has no place to go. So we're trying to give the camera some room to move once we get over into After Effects. All right, now once again we're going to save now. File, save, or Control S. So we've got our pristine Photoshop file saved. That's great. This is the one that we're going to use to animate in After Effects. But I don't want you to turn this in. If you turn this one in, you'll actually lose points. It's like 50 megs or something, maybe more, depending on the size of your image. We're going to create a file that's about 4 megs instead. So the first thing we're going to do is reduce the size. Let's go up here to Image size. We're going to take the size down to 800 pixels of width. The height is going to automatically constrain here. It's 800 by 533. We'll click OK. And so you can see how it's really small now. Also, for the version that you're going to submit for a grade, we don't need this background image. That's only insurance for you if you need it to repair something. We only need these two layers, the foreground and the background. Now, go up to File, Save As. We're going to change Photoshop PSD to Photoshop PDF. Check and make sure, very important, check and make sure layers is checked here. Okay, that's a big deal. We need to make sure that when you turn this in, layers are intact. So let's name this file, what is this, project 2, 3, I can't remember now, project 3A, your name, .pdf. And we're going to click Save. And I want you to change high quality print to smallest file size. Click Save PDF. And that's it, folks. We are done. Again, remember, don't turn in the PSD file. And don't try to use the PDF in After Effects. Actually, it won't work, so it doesn't matter. Okay, that's it. Please let me know if you have any questions, and good luck.